Hi guys, it's Mrs. Millison. Okay, today we're going to talk about this keyword. Okay, first let's look at some variables with the same name and talk about scope a little bit. Okay, I created a class file called this thing. So I'm going to come in here and create a string variable called name. I'll put my name in it. Oops. And then I'll just print the name variable. Okay, and I know what's going to print. Barb should just print and be done. Okay, exactly what I thought would happen. Okay, I'm going to come out here. I'm going to create a static method. String state name. And inside this method, I'm also going to create a string variable called name. And I'll just give it another value, and I'll return the statement a little different. Okay, and then when I come up and print this method after I run it, and again, it's a static method, so I don't need an object to attach it to. What's going to happen here is I'm going to print the name is Mike. Okay, so it printed Barb from this class variable and then the print statement, and then it created this line from this method variable with the same name. So if you have variables with the same name, they're going to follow precedence by their scope. Okay, so of course, a variable within a small segment of code is going to be assigned there. A variable assigned within a method is going to exist there, and then a variable assigned within the class is going to exist there. Okay, so you know the system knows the difference between this name and that name because of where they're located. Okay, all right, I'm going to turn this this thing into a class. There's some of this space, and we're going to need our main method in a little bit. I already created my instance variables down here. I'm just going to do a little copy and pasting. Save me some time. I think these are the only two I did. Yeah. Okay. So I just created still got to type everything, huh? Do that. All those little asterisks. Okay. So everything's pretty lined up. So now I have some instance variables for my this thing class. Let me compile. Excuse me. And then I have a constructor for this thing, which will take whatever numbers I put here in these parameters and assign them to the variables. And I have a method, a setter method, so I can change the numbers of my instance variables. But you'll notice that all of these have the same variable name. Okay. Now, you'll notice when I compile, I'm getting these messages down here. They're not errors per se, they're just warnings. And what it's saying is the assignment of variable num1 has no effect. Okay, so let's see what happens. Let's create a this thing object. Okay, we'll set some numbers and we'll print it in our constructor, and then we'll use our set nums method to change it, and we'll print it and see what happens. All right, let me come down to my main method. Let's see, this thing, thing one. Oops. And my constructor needed two numbers, so there's my constructor. And then I'm going to use the set. I forgot what the method was called. I always do. Set nums, and I'm going to change it to 7 and 8, and I'm going to run that off of the thing one method, or thing one object, excuse me. And then I want to print each one of these. Okay, so I'm going to print out thing one here. Okay, and I would expect to see, oh, I need a print statement. I need a print method, don't I? We need to put a print method in here. Let's see. Let me finish this code, and then we'll add our string to string method. Okay. I already do that. Look at that. I already had it done and I forgot to copy it. All right, let's get it up here. Mm-hmm. Well, I'm going to put it up here with this stuff. So that way I have all my um, object methods near each other. Let me do my little bit of spacing here. Okay, so my string to string will simply print number one is num1, number two is num2. Okay, let me compile. Still getting those errors, and we'll see what happens. So using my constructor and my setNums method, I have created one object called thing1, which should print the numbers 5 and 6 when I print it. And then I change the numbers to 7 and 8, so it should print 7 and 8. Okay, so let's see what happens when I run. It didn't print 5, 6, and 7, 8. It printed zeros. Okay, the reason that this is happening is because the system doesn't know what to do with these variables because they all have the same names. It's getting confused. Should it assign this the local variable number or the instance variable value? Okay, so it's getting confused. So how we're going to deal with that is we're going to use the this keyword. So what I can do, I'm going to put the word this with the dot operator in front of all of my instance variables. So this will say take the instance variable num1 and assign it that num1 because these now it sees these two as the same and it sees these two as the same. Okay, num2 is going to take that value, which is going to assign to the instance variable of num2, which is there. Okay, now I'm going to have to do the same thing with this method because again it doesn't quite know which variable to use. Method, the local variable or the instance variable. And I'm going to do it down here too. Okay, so now when I compile and run, I didn't get any of those warnings anymore. So now it knows, okay? Now the system is not going to get confused over what do I assign to this num1? That num1 or that num1? Okay, now that I've designated using this, it knows to take these values from the parameters and assign it to the instance variable for that object. So now when I run, now I'm going to get what I want, okay? My object created does become 5 and 6, and then when I change numbers to 7, 8, it becomes 7 and 8, okay? So that's the value of the keyword this. um, Using the keyword, it really is a personal preference on your coding, okay? It needs to be used when you do name variables the same thing. Now, naming variables the same thing when they're not the same thing, they're not pointing to the same object or the same uh, um, primitive type or primitive thing, it's confusing. Okay, so we don't usually use the same variable. We always change it a little different in the parameters of the constructor. We change the variable a little bit in the parameters of our methods. Okay, so it's, I don't want to say don't use variables that are the same name, but don't use variables that are the same name, okay? Because things like this can happen. You can use this, the keyword this, to overwrite it, but I don't want you to forget about that and then suddenly you're not getting the result that you wanted. Okay, let me show you one more thing, okay? So I think we're going to do one more method. Let's do a multiply method. It's going to yield an int that's going to multiply the num1 times the num2 for an object. Okay, so we would return num1 times num2. Okay, now I'm going to run this attached to an object. So if I run this attached to an object, it should designate, it should know that it's going to take the value of num1 for that object and multiply it by the value of num2 for that object. There's no confusion inside this method on where the num1 and num2 are coming from. I don't have any parameters. Okay, so if I come down here and I run that off of my thing one, what was it? Multiply. there shouldn't be any confusion because it knows to go to thing one, and there's no confusion in the method because I'm only using num1 and num2 once. There's no parameter with that name. So I don't know, what is it? 7 times 8, 56? Oops, did I run? Okay, and it had no confusion. Okay, now it worked fine without this keyword. I can add this keyword to it. Okay, and all that's going to do is emphasize that I need to take num1 and num2 for this object that I run the method off of. Okay, so I don't necessarily, I should get the same output. I don't necessarily need the this keyword right here, okay, because there's no confusion on where num1 and num2 are coming from. Okay, I definitely needed it here, okay, because of the duplicate use of the variable name. Okay, so again, using this keyword is a personal preference when you're coding, and you probably won't use it a lot because it isn't good practice to use the same name for a variable. But if you find that you are, you can certainly use it. I tend to use it mostly in constructors, sometimes in methods, but mostly in constructors, simply so I can keep the variables the same because they always all match up. But I tend to not use it within my methods. But anyway, that's the this keyword. So hopefully that was helpful. And I guess that's it. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I wanted to say. No, I think that's everything. Alrighty, guys. I hope this was helpful, and I will see you all later.